in today's Science-mancy on how the neurology of social trauma leads to a lack of social reward and therefore to severe social avoidance. And to anyone who studies addiction, or to anyone who knows anything about childhood trauma, this will make a lot of sense. So in this experiment, they used juvenile mice and exposed them to a model known as chronic social defeat stress, which is basically where they take much more aggressive mice and they put them in with them for 15 days. So basically they're bullied for 2 weeks straight, and they develop symptoms of what looks like depression, and they are just simply scared of interacting with anybody, even another non-threatening juvenile who comes in. Then these scientists used a bunch of work involving chemogenetics and optogenetics, which is the using light to turn on and off genes and to see what is happening. It was a very involved study to figure out what's happening in the brain to these mice because of this severe social stress. And basically they found out in the lateral septum area of the brain, which is in charge of regulating social behavior, and it's a generator of emotion, in those neurons, it turns out that once this trauma or stress had happened to these mice, what they previously would have perceived as a positive social experience, they now perceived as a negative social experience, which makes a lot of sense. It turned off that part of the brain that saw a happy face as a happy face and turned it into a grimace instead. And you see this all the time in the real world. As someone who looks a lot at opiate addiction, one of those common things you hear is, my first shot of heroin was like the first time I ever received a hug. And listening to someone like Dr. Gabor Mate, almost everybody struggling with very severe opiate use disorder generally has a very strong history of childhood trauma and abuse. And what that does is often it turns off your opioid receptors, which are your very basic, pleasurable receptors of seeing good things in the world. And if those never get a chance to develop, you can't see those positive faces as positive. You can't see those other kids, they always look like they're making fun of you, not that they might be trying to get you to play with their games. And so this is an experiment showing that when you have that kind of stress when you're young, it makes sense that it's so much harder later in life to perceive other people as positive, and for that not to lead to just wanting to not be around people at all. And since addiction is often called a disease of disconnection, it would make sense that the trauma leading to the lack of social reward would also lead to a lack of social connection and make things even worse. So this was a very well done study, and I think it gets to the heart of something that's can be very hard in humanity. It means we have to take care of our kids.